Welcome to We Got Options with the Doctor and Son. I'm Dr. Latasha McElwain, and my son is Tremaine Green, and we are here to talk a little bit about relationships. This is part 4 of our relationship series that we've come up with, speaking on the book Single, Married, Separated, and Life After Divorce by Miles Monroe. All right. So we've already talked about being single, well, being in relationships, being single. We talked a little bit about being married also. We did a show regarding that. And now we want to talk a little bit about kind of being married, getting to that point of separation, and then also talking about divorce and then life after divorce. So we wanted to kind of jump in with the book here. Of course, Dr. Miles Monroe was a minister. So his book is a book that makes sense for me as far as reading it. I tell people all the time, if you're not a big religious person or whatever the case may be, reading this book and taking the religion out of this book is still a book that has so many nuggets in it that makes sense for life, period. Okay. How we talk to each other, how do we meet with each other, how we take care of ourselves, and how we look to take care of a family as well, or our partners moving forward. So one of the things here, I wanted to start in chapter 12, which talks about the history of divorce. So of course, in the book, Dr. Monroe went into talking about the history of divorce from the context of the Bible. And a lot of what he said did make sense. A lot of it was just, wisdom and some teachings, of course, that definitely come from the Bible. But even if you take some of the Bible pieces out of what he's talking about in the book, you will also realize that he's given the history when it comes down to come from a biblical aspect of the Bible. But some of the things that he's talking about is those principles, interpretations. And I tell people all the time, a lot of these principles and interpretations he starts talking about in the book is a lot of stuff that I tell people you have to figure out, not necessarily what he says, but reading it, and then hopefully you'll start to come up with better interpretations on your own. You'll come up with better understandings on your own. You'll come up with better intentions for yourself. You'll come up for better intentions for your relationship. You'll come up with different strategies and different aspects. But a lot of these strategies and aspects are eventually going to look like, well, not look like, they're going to actually fall back on your beliefs, your values, and your understanding, beliefs, values, understanding, probably how you were reared by your parents, or family members, and then also kind of working together to figure out, okay, so what about her beliefs? What about my beliefs? What about our beliefs together? It's going to be a lot of that when you're thinking about different parts of the history of divorce, and kind of what I usually tell folks, it's safe to say typically what goes wrong, right? So as we're thinking about this, I always tell people, if you think about the things that it means to be a good person. It talks about a righteous person in the book, or being righteous. But being a good person, when you talk about being a good person, is all those things that you want to you know, exhibit as a good person. And a good person being a good person that you take care of you, and a good person that you take care of your partner, a good person that you take care of your family, that you have some values, some morals, respect for other people, and things of that nature. So when we're talking about the history of divorce, when those things are not there, then that's when we start, going down that rough path of talking about divorce. Tremaine, what are your thoughts on some of that?
But in terms of divorce, it's not like you say, it shouldn't be seen as a bad thing. It should be, you know, a learning experience for everybody involved.
Oh, yes, for sure. And I think when we talk about divorce, again, like I said in the book, it gives more definition and more all of the biblical aspects of where divorce started in the Bible, when it became something that was to be done, that could be done for the most part. A lot of times, I remember when I was going through my divorce, I heard that whole, if he was unfaithful to you, then he's pretty much compromised the marriage. You know what I mean? If, and I've heard other people say some other things that, if there are things that are going on, then, there are things that compromise the marriage. And everybody tells me, oh, but the key one is being unfaithful. So a lot of times I tell people, when we are talking about divorce, it does talk about adultery in the Bible and divorce. It does talk about that, but I usually tell people too, we have to think about it in context of, if we're going to make it, having, creating these vows and vowing to each other to be there, then we have to consider everything we're vowing to. I usually tell people, think about the vows that you make when you say the regular vows, forsaking all others. There's a lot of things that it says in the regular vows that you can, that they say that you're married. You know what I mean? And there are a lot of things that they're deep parts of the traditional vows of, if you do the traditional vows when you're getting married. But a lot of people like to make up their own vows as well, which is very interesting and very intriguing also. But I think the intentions and the motives behind, the vows and the covenant of a marriage, when we're talking from a religion standpoint, there's a lot there. But like I tell people, that's not to say that, it's going to be perfect for every single couple, because every couple, may not be able to uphold those vows. And I think that's where, individuals like myself, when we're talking about therapy and counseling, we come in to try to work with families. If they can make it, they can make it. If they can't make it, then we try to work on situations to make things work out in the best interest of the family. So from there, I'm going to jump into the husband's responsibility. So yes, there is a chapter in this book by Dr. Miles Monroe that talks about the husband's responsibility. And when we're talking about the husband's responsibility, I always like to say, again, this is coming from a standpoint of speaking about the biblical man in all of this. And I always tell individuals, well, I feel like everyone, I mean, I've even had this happen to me, Tremaine. You'll probably laugh when I say this. I've had somebody tell me that they're, and maybe this is not something to laugh at, but anyway, someone told me they're atheists at one time. And I was like, atheist, okay, okay. And in the same breath, they told me, well, I'm just waiting on, for me to go to sleep and, my rib to come along and marry me. I'm like, what? But you're atheist. What does that mean? So I tell people in a minute that, some people use stuff so loosely nowadays, but I leave that alone. Tremaine, I don't know if you had any comment behind that one or not.
I mean, it's sometimes when we say sometimes we're less religious, sometimes it just tends to pop out of us anyway. It doesn't mean that they didn't live in a religious household at one point.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's more of that's more like a slip of the tongue.
Yeah, I kind of believe so. I kind of believe so. So yeah, so when you look at the responsibility of a husband, this is the responsibility of a husband coming from a lot of the things that come out of the Bible. But I also think that this is also good information to have in place when we're talking about some things that that are unclear to us. I find that this book doesn't give it gives you, like I said, golden nuggets to kind of work from and work with. But I also think that when people do read this book and they kind of, join together in marriage, there are some responsibilities that we talk about prior to when we're doing our pre-counseling, premarital counseling. And a lot of times with premarital counseling, I try to hit every expectation possible. And I do tell a lot of my individuals that go for Christian counseling that when they're doing Christian counseling, there should be a lot of aspects that do get hit. But if those aspects do not get hit, that's where a counselor like myself, I don't necessarily call myself a secular counselor because I just kind of say I'm a counselor, but yeah, a counselor like myself is going to hit on some of those things that make sense for a marriage. So Tremaine, I think I'm gonna try to go through some things that make sense for a marriage. And with this being said, I'm not talking about the male's responsibility versus the female responsibility. I'm just talking about responsibilities of marriage. So there are a couple of things I always tell individuals, there are expectations that we just cannot get around. Those expectations, the first one is finances, you know, money, figuring out what's going on, how we're going to do this, what's this going to look like. When it comes down to a house, a home that we live in, and how it's going to be ran and what's going to be done and who's going to do what and what kind of roles are going to be set up in the house. Another one would be relationship and friendships outside of the home, where their work relationship, family relationships, other friendships, and things of that nature. Those things are expectations that have to be considered as well. And then the last one would be what people feel like, oh, wow, I'm not sure. And it is the intimacy game, as far as being intimate and being, sometimes even sexually involved. Those parts of the expectation, those are real big parts of the expectations when it comes to marriage. Tremaine, would you kind of agree with that for the most part?
Yes, entirely. um, I mean, those are things that like we said before in our many episodes of this, has that communication is important, and that's through all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like your intimate moments, the things that bother you, stuff that make you happy.
Mm-hmm.
You want to have a good line of communication because you want to be able to express all those things and not have to hide anything from anyone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's one thing that is stated at the end of the chapter that talks about the husband's responsibility. He's pretty much saying to remember that marriage is more than let me start again. Marriage is more than a legal contract to physically sleep together and share the family financial obligations. Marriage is the joining and uniting of two souls wherein lies the center of submission, conviction, values, and morals, and uh, spiritual perceptions. And then it also goes into saying, if the soul is not compatible, the relationship is on the course of a tragic disaster. Okay. So that was one of the last sentences of the chapter talking about a husband's responsibility. And to me, that really strikes a chord with me. Okay. And that strikes a chord with me because at no time did something come up about God in what he's saying. He is just mentioning what marriage, what is more than. It's not just this, it's not just that, but here are some of the other things that go along with it that we have to figure out where we stand. Does that kind of make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that's a true little statement there that is given at the end of that chapter, which is amazing. I love it. I love it. But with that, we're going to go ahead and go to a commercial break, and we'll be back after these messages. Hi, this is Dr. Latasha McElwain, and I would like to introduce my first book. The name of my first book is Fragile Brokenness: The Unspoken Secrets That Shape a Pretty Unprotected Girl into a Practicing Clinician and Therapist. My key phrase is, when life gave me lemons, I gave life a doctor. I hope this would be an inspiring read for everyone. with inspiring experiences and heavy experiences that will bring about the importance of being self aware, dealing with traumas, and being focused on your mental health wellness. The proof is in the journey. I hope you enjoy my book, Fragile Brokenness: The Unspoken Secrets That Shape a Pretty Unprotected Girl into a Practicing Clinician and Therapist. Sales begin December 2023. And we're back with We Got Options with the Doctor and Son. We are still dissecting and talking about the book Single, Married, Separated, and Life After Divorce by Dr. Myles Munroe. And in our relationship series, we decided that we wanted to make sure that we kind of went through this book and then kind of just, pull some things out. Again, this is a book that I typically use as my point of reference when I'm working with families and when I'm working with couples therapy and when I'm working with a single individual that is looking to do more with their singleness or do more with finding someone they want to marry or they wanting to connect with someone. This is a good kind of outline. I say, whether you're religious or not, this is a good outline to kind of pull some things into perspective, as well as seeing things from different perspectives and bringing a little bit more clarity for some folks. Okay. So I do use this book in my therapy sessions. So I refer to this book in my therapy sessions and have individuals purchase the book. Of course, I make no money off of it, but it is a great read. It's a great sit down for a lot of folks to kind of talk about and then to kind of process through with their partner, with their spouse or their partner. Okay, so broken relationships. So it talks about broken relationships and some of the emotional issues that come up in marriage. And a lot of this stuff that it's talking about in here, a lot of the different words and different stories that it's sharing, of course, is talking about, when these promises are broken, we take vows and then we break these promises and we have this impact on our relationship that's really, really an emotional turmoil that we end up going through. And I always tell everyone, if you know already, then your partner has the right to know I also, so you can figure out where you need to go next. You know what I mean? I think a lot of times people don't realize that once they are, in the relationship and things are going downhill fast, bailing out for Mayday is what some people say. That's what all people want to do. I'm not saying that's what people should do, that you should go run into divorce, but I do believe that coming together and trying to do some couples counseling will be most appropriate. And I will say this too, because I've experienced this also in life. If you meet someone or you're going through a separation process or whatever the case may be, and someone wants to be involved, like we start talking or we start having relations or we start, whatever it is, I tell folks in a minute, that's a person that if the other person has morals about them, they're not going to deal with that person long. Not only are they not going to deal with that person long, they're just not, it's not going to be a fit. You know what I mean? And I can honestly say that because I remember, meeting some gentlemen that, said, oh, well, me and my wife are separated. And I'm looking at them like, well, I really don't deal with people like that. Oh, well, no, and this, that, and the other, and they want to be friends and everything else. I'm like, no, I don't want to be anything. So I say that to say, depending on what's going on in your level of life, and not to say that, no, someone did tell me they were divorced or not divorced, they were separated or whatever, and we still had conversations and went out and did all kind of other things or whatever. But I say that to say, in my mind, and this might be personal, but in my mind, I didn't have respect for that person if I even considered going out with them while they were in a separated period, because I already know that if I was separated, I wouldn't want to be dating anyone either. I would want to either be working with my partner, especially if I'm in couples counseling with my partner, I'm definitely not going to compromise myself or compromise anyone else. But you do have people running around, and that's their game and that's their motto, and that's what they do. So I always tell people, when the relationship is broken, then it's seriously a decision to make, instead of dragging out all of these emotions and creating all of these issues and these other issues. And I've even been sadly in a situation where someone was very interested in me, and when I was like, well, no, I'm not going to go any further, I was actually sitting there saying, why is this person, I'm saying no, I'm not moving any further, and they are technically in a separation period, and they won't leave me alone. And I just said, no, we're done. I'm your friend, and that's all I can be. And if you don't want to be that, I can't do nothing else. And I mean, and let me just say it like I really want to say it right now. I felt like this lady's husband is running me down when they're technically still married and going through a separation right now, which anything can happen. They can end up together or they can end up apart. But why is this woman's husband running me down? Does that make sense, Tremaine? You get what I'm saying?
Uh-huh. Absolutely. You
Yeah.
shouldn't be put in a predicament where you're stuck caught in the middle.
Right. And I found it to be very annoying that I was hanging out my phone, I was blocking numbers and all kinds of stuff. And I had daddies calling me and cousins calling me and friends calling me. And I was like, this done, no. This done went too far. You kind of get where I'm coming from? Like,
Hmm.
you and I started, and then that's when I really got kind of raw about it, and I started saying, you're technically still married, don't you do that to me, you know what I mean? And finally just saying, if you don't stop calling me, I'm going to take out harassing papers on you, because right now you're really harassing me. You're calling me, you're trying to call me from every which way, and you got all your family calling me, and you got your daddy calling me, and don't do that. You know what I'm saying? I know I've been your friend for all these years, but don't break the relationship like that. Again, going through trauma and emotions, that is quite weird, because I was saying to myself, if I feel like that and I'm your friend and I was only trying to be a friend, putting my hand out there to you and shaking your hand and being with you and hanging out with you from here to there, but then realize that you are someone's husband, I'm not gonna go that far. And then you stalk me afterwards. Come on now. And I'm saying, sitting to myself, what in the, if you stalking me like this, then what are you doing to your poor little wife? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It just didn't add up for me. And like I said, in some of those situations, it could be me being as nice as I am and being as platonic as possible sometimes, and there's still you and I hate to say this, but sometimes I think men just get the wrong idea all the time, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, I say that to say it's the weirdest thing. But yeah, I've been in a situation like that before, where I was just like, being supportive that, whatever had happened to the individual and they needed help. They had some deficiencies, or some defects and things like that, that I was just, oh, do you need this? Do you need that? Okay, I can help you with this. I can pick up your groceries. I can, what I'm saying, just helping out here and there, because, you know, it, it was just a nice thing to do, is just to help out a little bit, because they, going through this separation and hadn't been able to pick up the pieces yet, known them for a long time. Let's try that. Just couldn't work out though. You kind of get where I'm coming from? Just
Yeah, you have to be very careful when you
Yeah, but
deal
that's
with deal with certain people and their problems.
exactly. And I think, that's why I tell people a lot of times, you got to be careful with that. Of course, when you get to that point, like I said, if I wasn't the person that put my foot down, I think that it could have been more of a emotional and traumatic situation if I kept going with that individual, even if they went ahead and they were in the separation process and then they went through the divorce or whatever. If I had went along with that person, well, I'll be this right here. I don't even know if the person went through a divorce, the divorce, because they could have, could have very well gotten back with their with their partner. But I say to myself, I wouldn't want to go through that, and I wouldn't want my worst enemy to go through that, because that is the worst nightmare of all, to have to go through that. And you honestly, I have to say, I know a lot of women that have done it. I was there when he was having the affair. So I was the person that he was having the affair with. And then they went through their separation. I was still there. And then they went through the divorce and I was still there. And then finally he came and he married me and I was still there. And now we're miserable the same way he was miserable with the first wife.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that is not something uncommon for me, as in seeing relationships growing up and seeing relationships throughout life. See that mess all the time. I'm not interested, my emotional intelligence had to be developed a little bit more. And that's what I try to work with my clients, so that they can figure out, figure things out before all of these emotions and all of these promises are broken and we end up in the trauma of divorce, which, push us right in onto chapter 15 in the book. And rightfully so, I'm not talking directly from the book. I'm talking about just experiences. And I think people have to respect that, see that, and hear that, when there's a divorce, there's no reason to recreate more trauma or even start trauma for anyone. Um, when there's a divorce, I'm speaking on relationships in general. I'm probably one of the only women that would probably say I have an amazing ex-husband, because I do have an amazing ex-husband, and he does a lot for my sons, which are his sons also, and he does a lot. We do a lot for each other's family. He don't really have to do anything for my family because my family don't live close, but his family, oh yes, we make sure everything's good. We make sure his mom's good. If family needs something, we're there. But a lot of times, when it comes down to the platonic and the relationship with my ex-husband, I really, really adore the fact that we can be great co-parents for our sons. So I say that to say, I don't tell people you should do this or you should do that. But I tell people this is my experience. And don't get me wrong, it started off very emotional and full of a whole lot of trauma when, and I think everybody, well, not everybody don't know this, but people, will figure this out if they read my book, that yes, my ex-husband was cheating, and he cheated for about 2 years before I found out. And finding out about it, within a few months or so, we realized that a child was on the way, and I had to bow out gracefully of that situation. I didn't bow out. I bowed out gracefully, but I still had some fire in me, and that fire in me created more emotional pain and created more trauma in our situation. He had fire in him too, and the same thing was coming out on his end. So fire and fire just wasn't really working. And years after just kind of letting all of that go and then going through some other things, it was just got to reconciliate with this person, because this person is the other half of my children, and I want my children to have a better, well adjusted situation than this, you know. So, and Tremaine, of course, you went through it, so I know you might want to chime in as well with that, those emotions and the traumas and stuff that people just create going through a divorce.
Yeah, it's. I think between you and Dad, it's not that. I think it's the time that you guys had away from each other to develop and grow on your own, and you guys didn't jump into relationships. Well, you didn't jump into a relationship that heavily immediately after.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
Because I mean, the moving into a new relationship like right after divorce, I don't think that that's a recipe for success.
No, it isn't. And I think I did mine differently because I dated the same guy, but I think we were still kind of leery as in whether we were going to be together or not. So I'll tell anyone. I mean, I've been with the same gentleman that I met 3 months after my divorce, but meeting him 3 months after my divorce, we have been, together on and off for 19 years. Of course, we're more on now than off, but when we first started, I just wasn't a healthy person. I still had emotions in me. I still had trauma in me. I still had a lot of dysfunction going on. And I don't, I'm not ashamed to say that. And I had to start developing and start growing to get my life on track. Not only get my life on track, I'm a person that feels like I practice what I preach. So I don't want to sit up there and tell someone that, oh, you this, you that, and I can see this and I can see that. I don't see all these different things in someone. And, when I leave work, then I turn into a client as well. And I'm starting to do all kind of stuff. And I'm doing, mischievous stuff to my spouse. And I'm running around cheating with this one and working with that one and doing that. I don't want that life when I'm trying to tell folks, live your best life. You know what I mean? And my best life is being loyal to the first person who is me. I'm the first person I'm going to be loyal to. Of course, I'm a Christian, so I'm gonna be loyal, in my spirituality and to God and everything else on that realm. But I'm gonna be very, very responsible to me as a person and very, very loyal to me as a person, you know? So I think when we talk about traumas, trauma causes a whole bunch of distress in relationship. It manifests into anxiety. It also can manifest into to depression. It's just so much that comes with all this, trauma that comes along with it. A lot of times, oh my goodness, I tell people in a minute, you start thinking irrationally, you start doing things that are inappropriate. So there are a lot of things that comes along with the trauma. Tremaine, you got anything to add on that?
Yeah. I mean, the trauma is a lot to take in, but it's not about like everybody's gonna have trauma and different things in their life that's gonna give them trouble. It's about trying to face those things and usually you come out a better person from facing them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing is that we don't want to re-traumatize, but sometimes things are going to happen and there's going to be trauma. Is what I tell people. If we can help it, let's try to avoid it. But if we can't help it and it happened and it's happening and it happens, then we've got to look at a place where we can start the healing process.
Yeah, we have to. I mean, when if it were to happen again, I think hopefully you would come up with ways that you can cope with the situation to better handle it without having the exact same thing happen to you again.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly. And, when you hit that big separation, that is one of the toughest things for individuals to do is to separate and to go ahead and finalize that divorce. That is also something. Those are major decisions that you make in your life. Some people, those are make it or break it. Those are, either you're going to make it or you're going to break. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
it's such, it's a big thing to deal with. And I tell people it's such a big drastic decision in life. But when you make that decision, my question always, and this is the question I always ask my clients a lot of times, Tremaine, is now what? What's next?
Yeah, you're gonna have to think of what's next. It can't just end with that relationship ends and you still got to go on tomorrow.
Exactly. But I'll tell
Like
anyone
I mean, especially if you have any other responsibilities like kids.
You got to go on for them tomorrow.
exactly, exactly. And I'll tell anyone because I don't mind disclosing this as well. But I became very suicidal during my divorce process in the separation and divorce process. I didn't know what to do. I was like, I felt paralyzed, but I just felt like I didn't want to be here anymore. And with being able to disclose that and share that, I tell people, you've got to it's not your time. Even if you attempt, and I didn't make the attempt on my life, it wasn't my time. I'm still here. I'm still striving. I'm still growing. I'm still caring for my children, so that wasn't the answer. And because that wasn't the answer, I had to figure out, okay, so what do I do now? And I'll tell anyone, and this is what I try to prepare my couples with too, is that we don't want to wait till it happens and then all of a sudden you don't know what to do and you about to, lose everything and you losing your mind and everything else. Let's figure out what the next steps are. I've even had some really adult like couples that have met with me that were so in tune with each other that they wanted to make sure the other person was just as happy as the other person was with their separation of their divorce, to the point where they actually was able to sit through, and we were able to come up with plans and different things of that nature where they could figure out what they were going to do with the house, what they're going to do with the cars, what they're going to do with the kids, how the kids are going to be, with this one, and then come back to that one, and how school is going to work out, and whose parent is going to jump in and help, whose side of the family is jumping in to help out. I mean, a lot of dynamics is kind of thought out that that person doesn't have to deal with all of that by themselves on their own. And it does make for a more smooth transition for the kids. Because I usually tell the parents, by that time, I hate to say it like this, but I'm gonna just say that I'm tired of the parents. I want to make sure that those kids that's going to experience this split in their home is going to get what they need to be successful, and we're not going to tear their poor little lives apart. Does that make sense?
Yes. I
Yeah.
mean, a divorce can really dictate a kid's life in very different ways that the child probably isn't ready for. But
Mm-hmm.
the thing is not to maybe not let it happen. The thing is to ease that burden on that child.
Mm-hmm.
Have them understand that this is okay. It may be not the greatest thing that's going to happen, but it's something that needs to happen, and everyone is going to be okay. We still love you. You are still important to us. That's not changing because we're
Mm-hmm.
not together.
Yes. 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 So, um, one of the things I wanted to add with that, Tremaine, too, is three traumas of separation is the three traumas of separation that Dr. Miles talked about, and Dr. Miles Monroe talked about in the book, was three basic traumas. And the three basic traumas that, come up with the stress and separation is a broken heart. I remember feeling very heartbroken. So a broken heart is there. Crushed spirit. Yes, I felt that my spirit was definitely crushed. And then the last one is a painful soul. I can definitely relate to all three of those without even putting the Bible involved in. You know what I mean? Those were some hard places to be in the process of going through a separation and divorce, that I think people have to kind of realize that, regardless of what I tell people, whether I believed in God, believed in the universe, I believed in just a higher power, I believed in anything else, I still had to figure out what I was going to do with all of that. Broken heart, you know what I mean? Um, Crushed spirit and painful soul. What was I going to do with all that? Does that kind of make sense for you, Tremaine? Because that's I think that's deep.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's really deep. What would you do with all that? And I ask the same question I ask my clients all the time. Now, what next? What are we going to do with all that? A lot of my clients, they don't know, but that's the reason why I'm in the play, to make sure that we can figure out what that looks like and how we can get over these hurdles, because these are going to be hard hurdles to jump. These are going to be some real high hurdles to jump, and your heart's going to be aching, and you're going to feel awful. Your spirit's going to be broken down, and you're going to feel so much pain. Your soul is going to feel like, oh my goodness, like, yeah. And I usually tell people too, when you go through a divorce is, one of my teachers told me this when I was going through my divorce in college. He told me a divorce is worse than death. And I didn't know what he was saying. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm not following. He said a divorce is worse than death. And I said, why? And he said, when you love somebody that much and they die, you never see them again. He said, but when you love somebody that much and you divorce them, you're going to see them again. I said, wow, how deep is that? You know what I mean? Like, that's, it just hit me on the head. Like, wow, you know, you love a person that deeply, but now they're gone. And that also segues into the grief counseling that comes along with losing someone. A divorce is just like going through, you're going to go through the stages of grief. And I tell people all the time, that's a no-brainer, but no one really thinks that's what's happening, that's what's going on. But it's a lot. to lose someone, whether you lose them to death or you lose them to divorce. It's an adjustment. I can remember being in my bed, sleeping on in the middle of the bed because I'm so used to sleeping real close to my, to my ex-husband. I'm so used to sleeping close to him. He's not there anymore, so I'm in the middle of the bed, and it felt like my bed was a king size bed or something. It was just a queen, but it felt bigger than ever, you know. So does make a lot of sense. But with that, well, first of all, Tremaine, do you have anything else you want to add to what I just said?
No, I think we're fine.
Okay. All right then. Well, what I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead and go to a commercial break, and we'll be back after these messages. For Options PLLC, providing counseling, consultation, and DWI services in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. Contact us at www.insightful-options.com 704-492-1105. And we're back with We Got Options with the Doctor and Son. And this is like I said, our fourth episode, fourth episode of our relationship series. We're finishing up with Single, Married, Separated, and Life After Divorce by Dr. Myles Munroe. We're just wanting to give a little bit more insight, and then we'll be kind of at the end of our series here, where we definitely want to talk about more relational stuff. Definitely with me doing a whole lot more relationship therapy, whether it be a relationship with an individual wanting that relationship with themselves, finding themselves, figuring out what they're doing in life, whether it's a couple that's working together and they're, looking for that those things in their life to get ready to get married or to maintain in their marriage or maintain in their cohabitating, or it's that couple that's already married and they have some things going on that they really want to focus on and kind of move in a different direction. And even those couples that are at a point where it's the breaking point and they want to go ahead and separate and they want to go ahead and call it quits and divorce, but just working with everyone where we can add a little bit more emotional intelligence and trying to incorporate and educate people on things that could be helpful for them. So as we journey into the last part here of our relationship episode, fourth episode, we're going to talk about kind of finish up with trauma and talking about the aftermath of trauma. So in the book, it does go into chapter 16 and I believe chapter 17, talking about trauma and talking about the aftermath of trauma. And then 18 talks about life after divorce and separation. That's chapter 18. And it really gives us a real good outlook on, okay, so once all this has happened, what can we do with this trauma? I tell people in a minute, and I'm going a little bit off script from the book. When it comes down to that trauma, we got to work on the healing process. The healing process is so hard because we've already done all kind of stuff with the aftermath of that trauma. We have avoided people, we've retreated to ourselves, we react to people in all kind of different ways. Sometimes we become definitely outgoing, trying to be a social butterfly. Some of us just withdraw and stay in the house, don't want to mess with nobody. We replace pain, replacing pain with people is one of the things he mentioned. And all that stuff resonates with me because I can see those things not only happening for the relationship I was in, but also in relationships that I work with on the days in and days out. I see couples going through these different things as they have already separated, or couples are individuals now separated, trying to figure out where to pick up the pieces. So basically, sometimes individuals might be looking for a security blanket, which is something that I tell people that's another emotional roller coaster to go on. Sometimes people, they're regaining custody of themselves and they don't even know what to do with themselves, or they're regaining custody of themselves and don't realize that they have to do a good bit of self love, self investments, and they have to really look at healing themselves and working towards doing things for, you know, for themselves. And a lot of people do retreat back to church. A lot of people retreat back to their religion and things of that nature. And I tell anybody, I don't knock anyone for doing that. I can remember definitely retreating to church and to my religion, and then I can also remember on in other occasions after a breakup retreating more into my spirituality. And I would say now that's where I'm at more so. I'm really into my spirituality now. Not that I don't believe in God or anything like that, but I am very much into, you know, making sure that I understand, you know, the world, what's going on, the natural things that are happening, and things of that nature, to work towards my healing and work towards me making sure that I'm a good person, not only, or a better person, not only just for me to be a better person, but to be a better person and well rounded in life. So I think that's something really major to start thinking about as we talk about the aftermath of everything and the emotions that you know, that we start to deal with, because those emotional aftershocks, yeah, sometimes we go into numbness, sometimes we go into you know, we're temporarily paralyzed. We have a lot of things that happen, and he talks about a lot of these things in the book. And I think that just listening to some of this makes sense. Sometimes, you know, folks go into the anger state, the self-pity state. People get to the point where they become very, very panicky or very, very fearful, very irritable. They have mood swings, and they just go on and on and on. Different things can happen. People who have definitely been hurt can be dangerous sometimes in a way that sometimes those irrational thoughts do come out. And so I tell people we have to be mindful. We have to be mindful with all of that, and we have to think about, okay, how do we get to the next step? How do we move forward in the most healthiest way without harming ourselves or harming anyone else? Does that kind of ring any bells for you, Tremaine, or make you anything stand out when I'm saying some of these things?
Yes. In terms of just moving forward, I mean, it takes a lot of time, of course. You know, you need some time away from the person and, you know, really to look inward on oneself and, you know, find the things that you enjoy and really let let a lot of it go. I mean, like they say, time heals all wounds
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, you know, grief and things of that nature.
Exactly.
It'll hurt, of course, still, but it will not hurt as much.
Yes. Yes. I'll admit, and I think you're right on point, Tremaine, but I'll admit that in the book, there's also some survival mechanisms that he talk about trying to, you know, get to a better place with trying to deal with all of these, you know, losing this relationship. And a lot of it really starts with just, you know, owning up to a lot of things and facing the facts for what it is. One of the first things he talked about is, you know, the things that people tend to do is, did you avoid facing the situation, either mentally, emotionally, or literally? That happens to people. You know what I mean? That's one of those things that happen. People get lost in the sauce. People go into isolation and isolate, keep themselves away from everything. Did you escape the situation in some way, or did you move into a fantasy world or into a quick new relationship? A lot of people escape that way. They try to get out of it. They try to go into something, and these are some of the emotional aftershocks that are happening. Did you deny what happened? Sometimes people say you deny what happened, and let's see, the last one is most serious, which leads to a mental or nervous breakdown. And when we get to the last one, is basically, you know, you're so far in denial from number three, and you got so much going on and hiding behind everything so much that when you finally got to face the facts and accept reality and move into this openness, and you know, that requires dealing with all of these consequences and these effects and results, that's when people tend to fall into a state where they have a nervous breakdown or a mental breakdown. What are your thoughts on that, Tremaine?
Yeah, when it's a lot to deal with, I mean, it just when it rains, it pours in that perspective when stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
And we can stay in that mindset for a long time. And the longer we stay there, we're not getting out of it unless we pull ourselves out.
Exactly. Exactly. And then he starts to go in to talk about the way out, and the healthiest way out, the recovery plan is um openness. Openness, being honest, just saying what the truth is and dealing with the changes as they come. And that makes so much sense. I tell people sometimes when they say the truth will set you free, the truth will set you free. And I think sometimes when you're open and you're accepting and you're more understanding of what's going on, and I always tell people I like to talk about grace and compassion in almost every session I do. I talk about having grace and compassion not only for yourself and the people, not only for the people around you and people you're dealing with and people who have done you wrong in life and things like that. You have to have grace and compassion for yourself. You first and foremost, you got to have grace and compassion for yourself, for the things that you may have made mistakes on, things that you may have done that was right in the moment, but wasn't right 3 weeks later. I mean, all these things that you are dealing with, you've got to forgive yourself and you've got to deal with some grace and compassion, not only when it comes to other people, but to yourself as well. What are your thoughts on that, Tremaine?
Yeah, you have to give grace to yourself because you're still developing, and that other person is still developing. No matter how old you are, no matter what you've done, you're still developing, still growing. So you have to give yourself grace
Mm-hmm.
to say, I'm still growing, I'm still in process, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not done. Which
Mm-hmm.
means I can still the beauty about being in process is that you can always get better.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think being growing and being in process, like you said, takes us to a point where we start again understanding, we start developing more wisdom, we start being more favorable to people, to ourselves, to whomever our higher power is. We're being more favorable to those things, and we know there is more to life, because we're making it through and we're developing and we're growing. And again, like I said, our understanding is becoming more clear. We're getting some clarity with things. Some people say closure, they need closure. I'm one of them person that kind of feel a little different about closure. I feel like sometimes I just need some clarity. Closure ain't my big thing, but to each his own. You know what I mean? But some people will say that they need closure. I'm like, well, you go find closure. All I need is some clarity, and I'm gonna be okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, closure can be fine sometimes, but closure usually leads you back sometimes to that same spot where you already are.
Exactly.
And finding clarity means that you have to let go of some of those things, and that's
Absolutely.
probably better for you.
Yes, yes. So I tell people a lot of times the healing process can be totally different for everybody, but the healing process is something that I try to take my couples through, I take my individuals through, I take my single individuals through to work on what can be your purpose and your way of healing. And everybody's purpose and way of healing can be totally different. And it's okay because, like I said, I like to try to throw out some golden nuggets that's going to help people to be able to look at it, form it, or mold it the way they need to form it and mold it to work for them. Or, like I said, add pressure to it to create that beautiful diamond, or go down there and clean it up and make sure, realize that oh my goodness, they got a gem there, they got a ruby, they got a, some of those other sapphire. They realize they got a gem right there with that information that was given, and they had to add their own touch to it to make it for them, you know? So to me, that's the amazing part of what I do. And that's why I love what I do. So yes. So with that, Tremaine, any final thoughts you have with speaking about this relationship episode and series that we've kind of done here?
I think we hit all the points we needed to.
Okay. Well, of course, to our listeners, if anyone feels like there's anything that you have questions about, you can always hit us up and let us know what those questions are. We are definitely open to having some conversations more about these topics when it comes to relationships. Again, we are coming from the book that I typically use in therapy, Single, Married, Separated, and Life After Divorce by Dr. Miles Monroe. It's a very good book when it comes to relationship and figuring out, what's next for me and how am I going to go about this. And all of this in this book, I bring it out to a result or the conclusion that if you can see and work through and understand what's going on with you, happiness and figuring out what's next for you, not based on what society says, not based on what anybody else say, but what's based on what you feel and what you say, dealing with your true beliefs, your true values, and your true morals, and your true standards in life, and creating those things. So all of that comes out of different parts of this book, and me, of course, adding in different things that help people combat their depression, combat their anxiety, deal with their healthy boundaries, putting healthy boundaries in place, dealing with some of your childhood trauma, dealing with things of that nature. All these things come into play when we're talking about therapy. So, Tremaine, I'm so happy you joined me in putting this small series out there to individuals, a lot of my clients, a lot of my colleagues, a lot of friends, people I know, acquaintances. I hope that they're going to enjoy all this. I try to tell them that, hey, me and my son have a podcasting show where we talk about all kind of mental health issues, concerns. Overall mental health is what we're really at in doing what we're doing. So Tremaine, again, thank you so much for being a wonderful, wonderful co-host and coming and joining me for this special occasion.
I appreciate you having me on.
All right. So with that, we are going to wrap up the show, and we hope to see all of you the next time when you come to listen to us. We got options with the doctor and son. Have a great one.